Hello and a very warm welcome to the channel. I've got another American history reaction for you guys today, so this is one I'm very excited about. It is the greatest recorded speeches in American history, and I'm very interested about it because anyone knows me knows I'm kind of like a history nerd. I've got like a separate history reaction channel. I'll put a link to that in the description and in the top comment. So I'm really interested to see what makes the cut. Off the top of my head, actually, it's 1933 to 2008. So obviously the Gettysburg Address, I think, is probably the most iconic speech in American history. Please, you guys, comment below if you don't agree. But that's kind of one that comes to mind. So that's not included. But in terms of what could be included, obviously Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream. I would. Kennedy, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for a country, his inauguration speech. Reagan, maybe, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Those are kind of some of the ones that spring to mind. I can't actually think of any iconic speeches from the founding fathers, which is kind of strange. Maybe, I mean, there must have been some. I mean, obviously this video won't address them because it's too early. But yeah, so I'm very interested. I'm looking forward to this, and let's go. Let's go.
First of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed effort.
So this is a brilliant speech. I absolutely love it. This is obviously Roosevelt. It gives you the date, so it's 1933. This is the New Deal era. I presume is this his inauguration? Yes, this is his inauguration address. So this is in the context of the 1929 Wall Street crash, the kind of the greatest financial crisis in American history, and indeed a crisis for the whole world. Roosevelt would kind of challenge that with the New Deal, which was a huge spending of infrastructure projects, which was pretty successful in moving things along. But it's so interesting to see him as, I don't want to say a young man, but like a relatively healthy Roosevelt. Because when I think of Roosevelt, I think of him in the 40s, in a wheelchair during the Second World War. So obviously it's really cool to see him earlier and to see that he was such a powerful and iconic speaker.
To convert retreat into advance. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941.
So this is the Pearl Harbor speech. I'm very familiar with it. It's a speech given immediately after Pearl Harbor, announcing the Pearl Harbor attack, and obviously it's already news by this point. And the United States declaration of war on Japan.
A date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
I think it's a brilliant speech because it's so solemn. Like you get the seriousness of the situation with those words. It reminds me a little bit of the Neville Chamberlain's speech when Britain declared war in 1939, which is also very famous. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's on YouTube. But it's sort of the right level of determination and solemnness and, shit, this is big kind of thing.
An American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy. That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT. The Japanese began the war from the air at Pearl Harbor. They have been repaid many-fold. And the end is not yet. With this bomb, we have now added a new and revolutionary increase in destruction to supplement the growing power of our armed forces.
Of course, the dropping the 2 atomic bombs, I mean, they killed more people than they thought they would. They knew they were devastating, but just how devastating they hadn't quite figured out, especially in terms of the kind of long-term effects of radiation. So I saw Oppenheimer a couple of weeks ago, which is really worth watching. I guess it's coming to the end of its run now. Haven't seen Barbie. I need like to get a Barbieheimer. But yeah, so I saw Oppenheimer. Truman's in Oppenheimer, and there's a scene where he and Oppenheimer have a kind of falling out. I mean, Oppenheimer comes to the White House and says how terribly he feels, and Truman goes, "I'm the one that dropped the bomb," and that actually happened. In fact, that's a historic scene. So
we have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic process.
So what's so fascinating about that speech is this is Eisenhower. This is the guy that was the supreme Allied commander in Europe in World War II. This is a guy that has like the military running through his veins. And he's worrying, or rather warning, about the build-up of what he calls a military-industrial complex. So it's really interesting, in particular, because of who's delivering it.
I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I mean, my God, he's a good speaker, isn't he? I mean, so I've only been to America twice in my life. I hope to rectify that, but so far I've only been to America twice. The last time I went, it was in 2017, and one of the places I went was to Kennedy's grave in Arlington Cemetery. But yeah, no, I mean, like, obviously there's lots of questions about him, but my God, he could deliver a speech.
My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
For a second, I thought he could say what you can do for America. that would have been pretty funny. Very good.
And there are even a few who say that it's true that communism is an evil system, but it permits us to make economic progress. Lass sie nach Berlin kommen. Let them.
So obviously such an iconic moment in the Cold War. So this was, I'm pretty sure it was after the Berlin airlift, which is where the Soviets shut off access to the parts of Berlin. So there was essentially an island of Berlin, which was part of West Germany. So that's the kind of democratic free Germany. And then East Germany, communist-controlled Germany, surrounded it. And at one point, the Soviets just cut off all access by road, so everything had to be flown in. It's essentially an attempt to kind of bring West Berlin to its knees economically. It failed because of the airlift, but I mean, it's like sort of this speech is such a strong verification of freedom. I think is probably the best way of putting it. I mean, hundreds of people died trying to go from East Berlin to West Berlin, or indeed East Germany to West Germany, were being shot as they kind of climbed over the walls. I mean, as a general rule, if you need a wall to keep people in, your political system probably sucks. let me put it that way.
All free men, wherever they may live, are citizens of Berlin. And therefore, as a free man, I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner.
I might say, my God, he was a good speaker.
I have a dream that my poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
And it's beautiful words, but it's also incredible that in the face of the kind of the oppression that was happening at the time, he isn't responding with calls for violence or anything like that, and he isn't kind of calling for the overthrow of the United States. Indeed, you can see the American flag being held presumably by one of the rally attendees. He's saying that we can make America a better place, a non-racist place, rather than we need revolution, because a lot of revolutions don't end out very well. I mean, it varies, but a lot of revolutions don't necessarily improve things.
Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
I mean, if there's like a theme running through all these speeches, which, I mean, he's probably pushing it, but maybe there is to some extent, it is literally the word freedom, which is probably the word that you most associate with America, right? It's certainly the word I most associate. In a positive sense, that there's definitely like a chain running through them.
There is no constitutional issue here. The command of the Constitution is plain. There is no moral issue. It is wrong, deadly wrong, to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country. To know war is to know that there is still madness in this world. There are poor to be lifted up, and there are cities to be built, and there's a world to be helped. Yet, we do what we must. I am hopeful, and I will try with best I can with everything I've got to end this battle and to return our sons to their desires. Yet, as long as others will challenge America's security and test the dearness of our beliefs with fire and steel, then we must stand or see the promise of 2 centuries crumble.
I mean, the big fear in Vietnam was that if Vietnam, it's called domino effects. The fear was if Vietnam goes communist, it will have a knock-on effect, and a whole bunch of other countries in Southeast Asia or South Asia will go communist as well. Weirdly, that didn't actually happen, despite the US obviously being pushed out of Vietnam. And today, ironically, Vietnam, while still theoretically communist, is pretty hostile to China, America's main geopolitical rival. And it is almost an American ally by default. So it's kind of weird how these things turn out.
Say to America is be true to what you said on paper. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech.
Oh God, so this is just before he was assassinated. Great.
Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now.
It's really interesting. It's kind of an oratorial point, but I love the pauses he puts in. I definitely say so far Kennedy and King are the two strongest speakers. I was surprised by Roosevelt, but these are probably the two best.
Because I've been to the mountaintop.
Very religious.
I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over
and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
I mean, like, this being one day before his assassination, his murder, cuts so deep.
Tonight, I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
I have some very sad news for all of you, and I think sad news for all of our fellow citizens and people who love peace all over the world. And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis, Tennessee. Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort.
Was it did the crowd actually not know? Because you heard kind of women shrieking like it was literally the first time they'd heard. I mean, like, wow.
For those of you who are black and are tempted to be filled with hatred and mistrust of the injustice of such an act against all white people, I would only say that I can also feel in my own heart the same kind of feeling. I had a member of my family killed, but he was killed by a white man. But we have to make an effort in the United States. We have to make an effort to understand, to get beyond or go beyond these rather difficult times. My favorite poem, my favorite poet was Aeschylus. He once wrote, "Even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness.
Oh, this is RFK. Sorry, I'm being an idiot. I thought it was JFK for a moment. But of course, RFK was also assassinated, ironically. There were sort of four very major assassinations happened in the 60s. So obviously King, the two Kennedys, and Malcolm X.
There's love and wisdom and compassion toward one another. Feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or whether they be black.
Throughout the long and difficult period of Watergate, I have felt it was my duty to persevere, to make every possible effort to complete the term of office to which you elected me. In the past few days, however, it has become evident to me that I no longer have a strong enough political base in the Congress to justify continuing that effort. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
Oof.
Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
Today is a day for mourning and remembering. Nancy and I are pained to the core by the tragedy of the Shuttle Challenger. We know we share this pain with all of the people of our country. This is truly a national loss. We've never had a tragedy like this. And perhaps we've forgotten the courage it took for the crew of the shuttle. But they, the Challenger 7...
I mean, I'm like a huge fan of space exploration and American space exploration, as you can see by this T-shirt. I'll admit I don't know a huge amount about the details of what happened with the Challenger. But yeah, I can see why it was such a grave blow.
Were aware of the dangers, but overcame them and did their jobs brilliantly. We mourn 7 heroes. And I want to say something to the school children of America who were watching the live coverage of the shuttle's takeoff.
Oh, God, it was live.
I know it's hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. The Challenger crew was pulling us into the future, and we'll continue to follow them.
There is one sign the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable, that would advance dramatically the cause of freedom and peace. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
And so this was in what was it, 1930? I think it was 1987. A couple of years before, a few years before the Berlin Wall and the total collapse of the USSR. But when like cracks were already showing, and yeah, I very bold words. Have I muted it? How the hell do I manage to do that?
Iraq and Kuwait. Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. These attacks continue as I speak. Ground forces are not engaged. This conflict started August 2nd when the dictator of Iraq invaded a small and helpless neighbor. Kuwait, a member of the Arab League and a member of the United Nations, was crushed. Its people brutalized. 5 months ago, Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Vice President, members of Congress, honored guests, my fellow Americans. We are fortunate to be alive at this moment in history. Never before has our nation enjoyed at once so much prosperity and social progress with so little internal crisis and so few external threats.
Well, obviously, the great irony is this was delivered less than 2 years before 9/11.
Never before have we had such a blessed opportunity, and therefore such a profound obligation to build the more perfect union of our founders' dreams. We began the new century with over 20 million new jobs, the fastest economic growth in more than 30 years, the lowest unemployment rates in 30 years, the lowest poverty rates in 20 years, the lowest African American and Hispanic unemployment rates on record, the first back-to-back surpluses in 42 years, and next month America will achieve the longest period of economic growth in our entire history.
Good evening. Just moments ago, I spoke with George W. Bush and congratulated him on becoming the 43rd President of the United States. And I promised him that I wouldn't call him back this time. Now the U.S. Supreme Court has spoken. Let there be no doubt, while I strongly disagree with the court's decision, I accept it. I accept the finality of this outcome, which will be ratified next Monday in the Electoral College. And tonight, for the sake of our unity as a people and the strength of our democracy, I offer my concession.
For the workers who work here, for the families who mourn, this nation stands with the good people of New York City and New Jersey and Connecticut as we mourn the loss of thousands of our citizens. I can hear you. I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
So this is the first one that I actually remember myself. I mean, all the other ones were either before I was born or when I was too young to have any recollection. But yeah, I do remember the Bush speech on the kind of the ruins of Ground Zero. Obviously, incredible. I mean, off the cuff, incredibly iconic moment. after such a tragedy.
And all those watching tonight from beyond our shores, from parliaments and palaces, to those who are huddled around radios in the forgotten corners of the world, our stories are singular, but our destiny is shared. And a new dawn of American leadership is at hand. To those who would tear the world down, we will defeat you. To those who seek peace and security, we support you. And to all those who have wondered if America's beacon still burns as bright, tonight we proved once more that the true strength of our nation comes not from the might of our arms or the scale of our wealth, but from the enduring power of our ideals, democracy, liberty, opportunity, and unyielding hope.
A crowd of 240,000 just to celebrate his election win. Wow. And again, like,
That's the true genius of America. That America can change. Our union can be perfected. And what we've already achieved gives us hope for what we can and must achieve tomorrow. This election had many firsts and many stories that will be told for generations, but one that's on my mind tonight is about a woman who cast her ballot in Atlanta. She is a lot like the millions of others who stood in line to make their voice heard in this election, except for one thing. Ann Nixon Cooper is 106 years old. She was born just a generation past slavery, a time when there were no cars on the road or planes in the sky, when someone like her couldn't vote for two reasons: because she was a woman and because of the color of her skin. And tonight, I think about all that she's seen throughout her century in America. The heartache and the hope, the struggle and the progress. The times we were told that we can't, and the people who pressed on with that American creed, yes we can. At a time when women's voices were silenced and their hopes dismissed, she lived to see them stand up and speak out and reach for the ballot. Yes we can. When there was despair in the Dust Bowl and depression across the land, she saw a nation conquer fear itself with a new deal, new jobs, a new sense of common purpose. Yep.
It's an incredible life when you put it like that.
Yes, we can. When the bombs fell on our harbor and tyranny threatened the world, she was there to witness a generation rise to greatness and a democracy was saved. Yes, we can. She was there for the buses in Montgomery, the hoses in Birmingham, a bridge in Selma, and a preacher from Atlanta who told the people that we shall overcome. Yes, we can. A man touched down on the moon. A wall came down in Berlin. A world was connected by our own science and imagination. And this year, in this election, she touched her finger to a screen and cast her vote. Because after 106 years in America, through the best of times and the darkest of hours, she knows how America can change. Yes, we can.
Oh, it is incredible when you think of what that one woman's been through. You know, being oppressed for these two different reasons. Obviously, he's saying that when she cast her vote, maybe she cast it for John McCain. I don't know. Probably unlikely, but yeah, no. I mean, what a life.
America, we have come so far. We have seen so much, but there's so much more to do. So tonight, let us ask ourselves, if our children should live to see the next century, if my daughters should be so lucky to live as long as Ann Nixon Cooper, what change will they see? What progress will we have made? This is our chance to answer that call. This is our moment. This is our time to put our people back to work and open doors of opportunity for our kids. to restore prosperity and promote the cause of peace, to reclaim the American dream and reaffirm that fundamental truth that out of many we are one, that while we breathe, we hope, and where we are met with cynicism and doubt and those who tell us that we can't, we will respond with that timeless creed that sums up the spirit of a people. Yes, we can. Thank you. God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
I'm really nervous about commenting too much on anything contemporary because this isn't a politics channel. I absolutely do not want it to be a politics channel. And I know anything contemporary obviously kind of fits into current debates. But leaving aside whether you think he was a good president or a bad president, whatever, yeah, that was a really strong speech. But no, guys, so if you stuck with me this far, thank you so much. I found that fascinating. So much history, but also like not an insanely long period of time. You think how much happened in those 70, 80 years? But yeah, I really enjoyed that. If you want to stick around, please do. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and hope to see you for the next video. Thank you.